All right, hello again, everybody. So we finished our moral theories section. So last time we looked at Young or Rawls, depending on what class it is. Um, and today we're going to be talking about ethics and identity. So identity is like a super important concept in ethics, right? So identity has a lot to do with kind of how we see ourselves, how other people see ourselves, the kinds of roles and relationships that we engage in, and those things will affect how we think about ethics and how we think about the good life and how we think about our role in larger institutional structures, right? So identity is a really, really important notion in ethics. And how we inform other people's identities, how we affect other people's identities, likely has moral ramifications, right? So it's morally wrong to destroy somebody's identity. Assuming that you can do that, it would be wrong to do that, right? And so identity is just really important for what we're doing in this class. So this week we're going to be looking at Placencia on immigration and identity, right? And we're also going to be looking at Susan Bryson on trauma and identity. And so these are two important, applications of identity in ethics. So the idea here is that is how we view the other, right? How we review or view and relate to the other is the central question for today. And do we owe something to the other, right? And that's kind of the topic of ethics. So why are we doing this? Why are we starting with identity? So this fella here, you can see that he is shaped like a person, right? This is a picture of what seems to be a person, and these are all the things that make up our identity, things that constitute our identity. So the narratives that we tell ourselves, things that we've done in the past that we remember now, things that have happened to us, our roles, our reputation, our friendships, our behavior, our abilities, our traits, all of these things inform our identity, right? So I am, I view myself as a philosopher. I view myself as a teacher and as an instructor, right? Those are roles that I have, right? But they also make up kind of who I see myself as, right? Um, and so if somebody were to change that, right? If somebody were to say, say that you're a terrible teacher, Spencer Atkins, right? And and you could totally say that in your teaching evaluation if you'd like to. But if somebody were to say that in a way that's malicious, that would damage my conception of myself because I see myself as a teacher and presumably a good teacher, right? Same with you, all the roles that you have. If somebody says, if you're a father or a mother, and somebody says you're a really terrible mother or you're a really terrible father, that's going to like really kind of like that's going to shake up your identity a little bit. And then if everybody tells you that, you might actually start to believe it, and then it'll really affect your identity. So the idea here is that ethics is aimed at helping us live a better life, right? Why do we do ethics? Well, because we need to live together, all right? We have obligations to one another. And if we abide by those obligations, we're going to live a better life. And so it's understood as harmony with the other, right? The other being other people. Um, how we see ourselves, how we see other people, that's going to affect what it is that we think we're obligated to do for them, right? It's going to affect how we perceive them, right? So identities bear on ethics insofar as the way in which we think ethically about another person will change based on how we view that person, right? Um, so, for example, one example of how ethics and identity relate to one another is is how we think about happiness, right? If we're doing ethics to make ourselves happy, what happiness will look like for us might be a little bit different based on kind of what it is that we value and how we view ourselves. And another thing is um, so the social contract, right? Remember, this is about how we view each other, how we view one another based on like human nature, right? And that like has several things about how like we inform one another's identities and how we relate our identities and how we view other people. So anyway, so ethics and identity are important for one another. That's the claim that I'm trying to make. Um, so, for example, you've seen these, right? So, what my friends think I do, what my students think I do, what my colleagues think I do, right? All of these different people, right, um, have a different perception of what it is that I do, right? As a teacher, as a college teacher, as a college professor. Um, so everybody thinks a little bit differently. So you guys probably think I'm Mr. Burns, all evil and stuff. And then like my parents think that I'm like this super nurturing like person, like Robin Williams. And then what I actually do in reality is great. So anyway, um so all of these different like how we perceive one another is going to inform how we respond to one another and whether or not we're going to respond to one another in a manner that's ethical or not, right? So identity and ethics is just like super important. So we're going to take this claim that ethics and identity are important and very much related to one another, and we're going to ask the question, um, how is it that we should treat illegal immigrants, right? So we're going to be talking about the immigrant and the immigration question in relation to ethics and identity. Okay, so Louis Placencia, right? Placencia. He has this paper on the undocumented Mexican migrant question, right? And so basically, the question is the label illegal immigrant, undocumented immigrant, these terms affect the identity of um, of those immigrants, right? Of the people that are here without the legal status necessary, right? Those people's identities are affected by these words in a way that's morally problematic, Placencia wants to say, right? Okay, so here's a quote. Basically, the idea is that we throw around the words illegal immigrant and undocumented immigrant very flippantly and very unreflectively, right? But these words have um, moral implications, wider spreading moral implications, right? For how the discussion even starts, right? So when we're going to be talking about immigration in America, the terms that we use already are loaded insofar as they are already dictating the discussion, right? And they're dictating what it is that we owe different people and things based on it. So we have these loaded terms, Placencia wants to say, that are maneuvering the conversation for us unreflectively and irrationally as well. Okay, so um, one thing is that Placencia notes is that the term illegal and undocumented migrant are not actually consistent with the language of U.S. Migration law. So he notes that it's actually an oxymoron, right? So if you are an immigrant, that means that you're here legally, right? That's what that term means. But when you say illegal immigrant, you're saying illegal legal person, right? And so that's like an oxymoron. So the term as it's used in U.S. law, immigrant is somebody that's here with legal status, right? And that's like one like technical problem with the term illegal or undocumented immigrant. Um, so what do these terms mean in their common usage? And Placencia is focused on the fact that they have come to have a meaning that associates them with crossing the U.S.-Mexican border that's perceived as improper, right? So the idea is, somebody says the term illegal immigrant. What comes to your mind? Well, what might come to your mind is like a person that has come from Mexico and crossed the US border and is living in Texas or southern Mississippi or Louisiana, right? Or somewhere out west. That's the image that you conjure up. But you don't think about somebody from Asia, somebody from the Middle East that's here on um, that's here on a work visa, right? Doing a PhD, and then disappears, right? And begins a life in America and doesn't go back home. That happens all the time too, right? But when you think about an illegal immigrant, the image that's conjured up is of somebody from Mexico crossing the US-Mexican border. And that's problematic. And Placencia is trying to say, like, look, like this term illegal immigrant is an oxymoron, and it like unfairly sort of dictates the discussion around immigration at the US Mexican border. And so what does all this have to do with identity? Basically, what we're doing is we're creating an identity for these people that are here in America. We are influencing their identities in ways that are not super justifiable and that are problematic, right? So the idea is that, look, you're here and you're responsible, you're legally and morally responsible, and you've done something wrong by coming to this country, right? And we're holding the individual responsible, and we're like painting them up to look like a criminal person, right? And so that's all just built into the term, right? And so if we want to have this conversation, and if you think that that's the way that it works, that's great, right? But that's a conclusion. Our language shouldn't just assume that at the outset. That's what Placencia is trying to say. So we should, so we are, with our terminology, we're negatively affecting the identity of these folks, according to Placencia, right? And we're doing so in a way that's not justifiable, he says. Now, we might ask, why is it not justifiable? He says that, look, when we all benefit from the presence of illegal immigrants, right? So, for example, I can go and buy a salad, and it's like $5, $6, right? All of the parts of the salad, all the vegetables on the salad, many of those parts, many of those vegetables have been picked by an illegal immigrant, right? And the illegal immigrant, right, is paid much less than somebody working that has full U.S. citizenship, right? So the idea here is that we all benefit from the presence of illegal immigrants, right? The immigrants that are here in America, they really benefit us insofar as things are cheaper than they would be if they were picked by American citizens. The other thing is that undocumented immigrants or illegal immigrants, they pay taxes, right? They pay sales taxes, and they actually generate quite a lot of revenue, as you can see here. I'm not sure what year this data is coming from, but $11.7 billion. It's quite a lot, right? Okay. So, okay. So we have a system that says that, look, we're all going to benefit from illegal immigrants insofar as we pay less for various goods that they give us because they make less than minimum wage, say. Okay, so we get cheap vegetables. Okay, so one reason why it's bad to have this term illegal immigrant is because people who come to America are incentivized to do that because our institutions will give them work, right? They'll get work, and so they have reason to come to America. And we are all benefiting from their presence here in America, right? We all pay, like illegal immigrants included, pay less for vegetables than they would otherwise, right? Um, and so that like generates all of these interesting reasons. Look, we're all benefiting from this. There's tacit benefit going on here, and we're hiring them, right? It's not like they're coming here and not working, right? They're coming here and getting work. So given this, why are they illegal? Right? We should come up with a new word that we can like identify these folks as, right? Um, and so what we're doing is we're saying like, no, look, you're doing something wrong. You're doing something wrong. Like you, the individual being here in America, is like morally and legally wrong, right? But they're coming here and they're getting all of these different or they're benefiting us in all of these ways, and we're giving them these jobs, right? So an issue here. Uh, so so Placencia says that we should come up with new terms that's not illegal or undocumented. Um, let's see, where is that? He wants to say informally authorized and formally authorized. Okay, let's think about this a little bit. Um, what is authorization? Authorization means that you are granted something, right? I am authorized to go to Walmart, to park in a Walmart, right? I can just go, I can just do that. Okay. Whereas, so authorization means that you are allowed to do something. Now, somebody that's formally authorized would be somebody who has gone through all of the legal steps to obtain citizenship, right? Whereas an informally authorized person is somebody that is coming to America without the appropriate documentation, right? But is nevertheless authorized to work in America, okay? And we're benefiting from the informally authorized person. So, informally authorized immigrant and formally authorized immigrant, he wants to say, or migrant, he wants to say, are better terms than illegal immigrant or undocumented immigrant, because they put our attention on the social structures, like who's doing the authorization, right? And whether or not that authorization is formal. So rather than focusing our attention on an individual illegal immigrant, right? Rather, we're looking at what is the body that authorizes, and our attention our like our word directs our attention on different things, different features of our environment, right? And he wants to say that these terms are less loaded. Also, a strength of this view that he does not recognize is the fact that you could have an unauthorized migrant, right? So if you have an informally authorized migrant, that might be somebody who is here and is working, right? And is like is in virtue of their work benefiting everybody else, like we've said. A formally authorized person is somebody with has undergone the proper steps to get a green card and to obtain citizenship. Whereas an unauthorized person would be somebody that came here and committed a crime, right? So that would be like a person that like we wouldn't want to have here. So anyway, so we actually have like three terms to work with rather than just two, right? Legal and illegal immigrant. So um, this Placencia wants to say that these terms won't affect the identities of individual people, right? Like legal and or like illegal and like undocumented do. So here's the recap of his argument here. Um, the terms illegal and undocumented focus solely on the individual and their being in the wrong. However, our social or societal institutions are structured that we benefit from their presence in this country. Like I said, with vegetables, right? We all get cheap vegetables because they're picked by people who are illegal um, or informally authorized. We do not wield our institutions to adequately deter employers from allowing those without legal authorization to play a role in our economic institutions. The idea here is that people are incentivized to come here because they benefit, right? And our institutions are benefiting these people, right? And these people are benefiting our institutions, right? We open like employers have opened up their doors to people who are informally authorized. So this not only incentivizes people to come here without authorization, but it incentivizes our social structures to continue to allow the practice. So we shouldn't identify people working without legal authorization as simply wrong of the individual, right? Since our society goes along with the benefit, right? So society grants a tacit consent for these people to be here, right? And as a consequence, we can't hold the individual responsible because our social institutions are set up such that we all benefit, right? And hence, we should get rid of these terms illegal and undocumented that focus on the individual and negatively affect his or her identity, but rather we should focus on the structures, right? So we should look at formal and informal authorization. Okay, this is our little bit about ethics and identity relative to the immigration question. Do feel free to raise objections, right? Um, feel free to email me questions. One objection that we might think is well, what if informal, informally authorized, and formally authorized have the similar or have similar negative identity problems that illegal and undocumented do, right? That might be an issue that he has to address, and he hasn't addressed it here. So that could amount to an objection, right? Maybe these terms are just bad too, and they have similar problems. In which case, he has to propose different terms. So, but anyway, if email me your questions, email me your objections. Feel free to write on this as a paper topic in the future, and good luck.